Hello，大家好，欢迎大家来到以色列美角的频道。我们等一下要采访一个叫做 Alon Penzel 的以色列年轻人，他写了一本书叫做 Testimonies Beyond Borders，就是记录了在10月7号发生的事情。
好，之前呢，他这本书是写英文，可是最近有翻译去中文，可以在 Amazon 可以购买。
那这是 Alon 写的《跨越边界的证言》的书，它是纸本版的。那如果你想要买电子版的话，也可以在 Amazon 的 Kindle 上面买电子版。So we have Alon with us right now, and we're gonna ask him some questions regarding this book, which you can all see in the background. You can also press the link below in the description box to get his book in Chinese. So, hi Alon.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for having me here.
So it's really good to see your face in Zoom, and I'm gonna ask you a few questions. The first question, first of all, I want to explain to our Chinese audience, just like how we have Chinese autumn festival called 中秋节 in our culture. So actually, on the 29th of September 2023, it was our Chinese Autumn Festival. And on that day, there was a Jewish festival called the Sukkot. And then what happened was something big happened in that festival. So I'm gonna ask Alon to tell our audience what happened in the 2023 Sukkot in the Jewish festival.
So this is very unfortunate, what happened. Another holiday of reunion, of families coming together, of feeling together as a family, as a community, of celebrating the opportunity to live as one, for unity, for peace. And at that time, unfortunately, thousands of Hamas terrorists broke the fence and invaded Israel from the Gaza Strip, massacring children, elderly, women, men, entire families in their homes while they were still in bed. It was morning. People who went to a festival, to a Nova party, families who were getting ready for their holiday dinner, same day. Over 1,200 people were massacred, and they were massacred in different ways, in cruel ways. Some of them were tortured to death. Some of them were burnt alive. Some of them were beheaded. Many different cruel ways of torture that Hamas terrorists, and basically terrorists who decided to invade from the Gaza Strip to Israel, to break the fence, to take the opportunity. Basically, Israel wasn't prepared enough that day. Took that opportunity to murder over 1,200 individuals, human beings, innocent people, children who had nothing to do with the war, who had nothing to do with the conflict. And unfortunately, this is the day that will be marked in our history for generations to come. And that's why I felt the duty to commemorate that day.
So I remember that it was a shock for us hearing the horrible news about Hamas terrorists breaking the fence, breaking the security fence, the highly sophisticated fence, killing and kidnapping people. And yet there are people who want to deny what you just said, the 1,200 people who were murdered and everything that happened after that. So the question is, just like how the international body is commemorating 27th January as International Holocaust Memorial Day, which sounds a bit ironic in my ears. We need to talk about what happened on October the 7th in relation to this day, I guess. And also, I mean, part of it is that's the reason why your book, Testimonies Without Borders, answers, perhaps that question or part of it. So can you, give us your thoughts about what what I just said and maybe summarize what you have seen and heard and written in the book?
Thank you for the question. It's very important because it is very relevant. I decided to start documenting the atrocities, basically documenting testimonies, and wrote the book. One of the reasons for that was that I'm third generation, basically the grandson of a Holocaust survivor who escaped from Germany to Shanghai in China, and then escaped to Israel. So it is very much related not only to the International Holocaust Memorial Day, but also to this podcast, to see how much, the entire international community is affected by this terrorist attack on October 7th, that the attack wasn't only against Jewish people, but against humanity as a whole. We have to remember that it wasn't just against Israel, it was against humanity as a whole. So one of the reasons I started documenting the atrocities was the understanding that just as people are denying the atrocities committed during the Second World War, during the Holocaust, they will deny October 7th. And so once it happened, I started documenting the testimonies from Nova survivors, those who survived the festival, from ZAKA volunteers, the rescue forces, the security forces, the medical forces, and those who recovered the bodies and tried to identify the bodies. I wanted to get every aspect of October 7th recorded for generations. And I was collecting over 60 testimonies. Some of them in the book, you may find it, exclusive ones that have still not yet been published internationally to the public. And you can find them in the book in Chinese as well, as you mentioned. It was important for me to document it in the most graphic and elaborated way, as hard as it is, as challenging as it is to read, out of the understanding that if we don't have all the specific details of the attack, then that worldwide denial that you just mentioned will go on. If this is what we're dealing with just a little over a year since the attack, just imagine what we're going to deal with in 50 years from now. Now it is still kind of fresh, the hostages are still not back home, and the families of the victims are still alive. They're talking about it, they're mourning for what happened, but just imagine what is going to happen when they're no longer with us. So that book is basically a historical documentation of what happened. This is why I decided to collect the testimonies, to write it, to translate it to as many languages as possible, and to make sure that as many people as possible around the world are exposed to it. This is not a mission of Israelis or the Jewish people only. It is a mission of every rational human being around the world, no matter their religion, no matter where they come from, no matter their background. What matters is that they are human beings, so they can identify with what happened to us on October 7th.
Right. But there are gonna be people who question you and say, how do we know the truth that you wrote in the book is actually the truth? And just like in the beginning, there was like a rumor about 40 babies being beheaded and burned. And then people who don't support Israel are saying, oh, see, Israel is making up fake news. How do people who read your book can know that whatever you have written is actually the real testimonies?
So obviously I went through a very long and careful and dedicated verification process of each of the testimonies that I took. Some of the testimonies which I was unable to verify are not included in the book at all. Israel's foreign ministry and Ministry of Diaspora are currently distributing the book worldwide to embassies, world leaders, etc. I think it is clear proof of the verification that was carried out. And I agree with you that there have been mistakes, throughout the way, such as the example you provided us with. As we know, there weren't 40 babies who were beheaded. Unfortunately, children, by the way, were beheaded and tortured. It's just that the numbers are not correct.
Exactly.
Exactly. And we have to remember that sometimes some of the mistakes, by the way, that were made in the beginning were made not out of evil reasons, just because it is. I have to remind you of the condition that the bodies were at after being completely burned and tortured, and you couldn't even identify the age of people who you saw there. So sometimes those mistakes weren't made, in order to it was basically a mistake, and still, as you're saying, it harms Israel, and I understand where it comes from. And so the most important mission for me, before having the book published, and obviously throughout the collection of the testimonies, was to make sure that the testimonies are 100% verified, that I have proof for every evidence, and unfortunately that I also see the body of each of the testimonies that I describe in the book, in order to make sure that I am, that I have every proof, evidence, forensic evidence for what happened, everything. So it was a number one priority for me.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's important to have the source material that you individually verified, and I can only imagine how,
Hard.
yeah, those images that come to your mind, I mean, it's gonna stay with you for some time. Yeah, with regards to the beheading, I think there were beheading.
It's written in the
Yeah,
book.
and this is something that for the audience to understand that it's yes, there was a mistake, maybe in terms of the numbers, but it is undeniable that there were beheading. So that's, I think, the main point. So yeah, thanks for your honesty and your heart and your determination, yeah, to remain true to the facts, because I think it's very important that you want to establish trust in what you wrote, and it's not a spin, or how people like to have an agenda. And I think yeah, what you're doing is very commendable. It's very difficult to write a book like this.
Yeah. It's probably not the kind of book that you would want to write when you were younger.
Fortunately not, but as I said, I felt like I had the duty to do so. And as you just mentioned, there were beheadings, there were people were tortured. In the book, I give an example of a person who was murdered in 4 different methods. He wasn't only burnt and shot, he was also stabbed and run over by a car. So this is just an example, one small example of the cruelty of Hamas terrorists. So those atrocities that were committed, I felt the duty to commemorate them. And that was, I believe, that is my smallest contribution to the commemoration of that awful terrorist attack.
I'm just now recalling the video footage of the recently 3 hostages that were released, and how the Hamas terrorists with their green bandana were just like surrounding the vehicles. When they opened the door, they were like howling at those 3 female. And look at their faces, tells you that these are the type of the people, and I think it does give some veracity to what you wrote in your book. You can tell even if they're all masked, but you can tell that they were ferocious, and they had some very
evil intentions,
eerie, like kind of like feeling behind even those. Well, if you don't understand what they were shouting in Arabic, but it wasn't something that gives you a pleasant, feeling about this. And it's just my comment,
Yeah, definitely. You're referring to Hamas terrorists who were surrounding the vehicles where the hostages were brought out, basically from Hamas vehicle to the Red Cross, and then transferred to the hands of Israeli forces. And you see, just as you mentioned, the evil faces. I'm saying monsters do not change, and just like the evil acts that they committed on October 7th, just how cruel those acts were. We could see that cruelty when the hostages were released. Unfortunately, we could just imagine that cruelty for the remaining hostages still in inhumane conditions in Hamas captivity, in tunnels inside the Gaza Strip. We can just imagine, because if this is what Hamas terrorists did on October 7th, what do you think is happening to the hostages now that are currently being held in tunnels in Gaza? And as much as we want to hope for best news, we know who we're dealing with. We're dealing with the Nazis of the new generations. I always say that the quality that was proven on October 7th shows us that they're not they're no better than the Nazis, and that their cruelty is basically identical to the cruelty of the Nazis, to the German Nazis. And this is why I'm always saying this is a new generation. We have gone through the Holocaust, and now we're dealing with a new generation of evil people who I think before October 7th, we couldn't comprehend how humans can become so evil, so inhumans. And I think for every rational individual who believes in humanity, this is hard to comprehend how people can commit such acts. And I think you can only comprehend it by understanding that those are not humans, but monsters that have been incited since they were born, against Israeli and against Jewish people. And we have to remember that. We have to remember who we're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a step back towards humanity.
Civilization.
Or civilization. That the whole world is trying to pursue or think that they have already gone into a new era of enlightenment, like we know better, we've learned the histories. Yeah, we're very sad and that this is still happening.
Very barbaric.
Barbaric, yeah, exactly.
Barbaric, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to shift the gears a little bit. And I want to talk a bit back to your book. And you had a verse from the Bible. Actually, it's from the Song of Songs.
Why did you put that verse there?
Why is that in the
Why is it
cover
important to you?
I think that the Bible and generally it has a lot of love, and it has a lot of power of resistance and hope and ambition and determination and strength. And while people are pursuing hate and evil acts and cruelty, such as we saw on October 7th, we have to see how we act differently. We have to see what the differences are between them and us and look into it. And I think it brings us a lot, as you mentioned, that verse brings us a lot of resilience, gives us a lot of resilience and trust and determination to a better future, and to the strengths to our strengths and unity when we stand together. And I think that this is what we should be focusing on. Obviously, the book relates to the atrocities that were committed, because this is super important to commemorate them. And on the other hand, we have to remember who we are and how different we are from them. And I think by relating to those ancient but strong sources of ours, we can remember who we are in relation to who they are, and to hold on to that, because unfortunately they murdered us on October 7th and they took many of us hostages. But we have to remember that the one thing they didn't do, and they will never manage to do, is to take our values and our strengths and our hope. And I think this is why I chose to use it as part of growing strengths within Israeli and Jewish people and people who are pro-Israelis around the world, again, no matter what your background is.
Yeah, and this relates to how we being Christians, we love the word. We believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Bible. And also the Bible talks about the Jewish people being the apple of his eye, and as well as being a testimony of God's presence. And as such, we want to reach out to our audience, and there are a lot of them in Asia, especially with Israel Mega's followers. So they do whatever they can to help Israel, obviously, and we want to share this video with them. Is there anything you want to tell them about anything that we just said that have not been said? Maybe something about your book, or whatever is in your thoughts.
So first, I would just like to mention again, for some reason, people from different locations around the world sometimes may believe that since it happened in the small country of Israel, somewhere in the Middle East, this is not related to them. And I'm here to remind each one of us that again, the attack was an attack against humanity. And when Israelis and Jewish people are murdered, then just like that, when we are hit by terrorism, the entire modern world is threatened by terrorism as well. We have a saying, we say the West is next, but I'm saying this is not only the West that is next, and this is not next, this is now. So the world is now, just like Israel was hit on October 7th, the entire international community is threatened daily by those acts of terrorism. We have to remember this is about all of us. When a child is murdered, no matter where, when an innocent child is murdered, each one of us, no matter what our backgrounds are, we should relate with it and we should identify with it and we should send our sympathies. And this is, by the way, why I decided to translate the book to Chinese as well. I'm encouraging each and everyone who's watching us right now to support this important initiative to commemorate those innocent people who were cruelly murdered in that awful day that occurred to us. Don't only purchase the book, but also read it, as challenging as it is. Be exposed to what happened, because this is our duty to remember what happened and pass it forward, because we have the duty as human beings to make sure that those brothers and sisters of ours who were murdered live with us forever. And the only way to do it is by remembering what happened to them and how it happened to them.
So, like Alon said, it's important not to just purchase the book, but also share this video or the link of this book to your friends, because it's really our duty to know what happened. This is the testimonies, and this is the only way that these people who were murdered can live on. And so we encourage you to get the book today. And once again, thank you, Alon, for your time and for your dedication of this important work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
very much.
Am Israel Chai.